Yeah, I'm welcoming you, the air that is around you, the named and unnamed that is around you. Uh, yeah, as we enter this young energy scape of Ubuntu. Um, so I have no plan on how to start or where we'll go or how we'll go. Uh, I think it would be against what I'm going to be speaking about, or speaking through, or speaking with, if I had to sort of set up a plan. Uh, I'll think what I will do is I'll probably give myself and that which needs to be spoken through me probably like 15 minutes, 15, 18 minutes. And then from there we can just open up the space and we can vibe. We can vibe. Also, for this next 10, 15 minutes, I'm inviting you to feel or do whatever you feel most comfortable with. If you feel to switch off your camera, if you feel just to put the sound on, if you feel whatever you feel you need to feel, I'm inviting those feelings to be valid and present. Yeah, because I'm starting to think that the universe is far more complex than what we know. Yeah. So let's begin. I'll just be starting with some deep breaths, and I invite you to also sort of just settle into some deep breaths. And what I want to frame as you breathe is to think of the breath that you breathe in as the same breath that has been on earth from the beginning of time as we see it. So when you breathe in, I want to invite you to breathe into a sense of like everything that's ever been. Dinosaur farts, ancestor farts, children, flower pollen, mycelium dust, jokes, stories, memories, pain, cries, decomposition, rot. I want you to breathe all of that in through a series of 3 breaths. Yeah, so you can find whatever way is comfortable for you, but I'll be breathing aloud if you want to maybe follow that or find your own breath pattern. So I'm not going to do too much around describing or speaking much about myself, especially in the singular form that all of us are cultured into in ways that is represented on paper, on our ID books, on our birth certificates, the sort of atomized version of the I that is separate to everything around us, that is its own individual silo. I'll speak about myself as in my shared experiences. Uh, I've been invited, and I shared a bit about this last night. I've been invited about into deep questioning through, first of all, young people in my life that have sort of disrupted and dismantled and agitated certain epistemologies and even made me aware that I'm holding certain epistemologies. Epistemologies being a certain way of thinking, a certain way of seeing, a certain way of feeling. Uh, and yeah, young people have an example of this would be like when a young person sees a chair, or what I will frame as a chair, they don't see a chair. They have the ability to see a spaceship, they have the ability to see a boat, they have the ability to tap into other ways of seeing. And I think this is going to be super critical for this conversation about Ubuntu. I will start first by contextualizing where we are right now. We are currently like knees deep in a dominant story that incentivizes, that creates the sensation of comfort, deliciousness, a sense of deep, deep, deep deliciousness in separability, in disconnection. For me to go to school, to work on myself, to work on my own academics, to even feel threatened by anybody who might need assistance, to eventually pursue having my own family and having sort of this way of thinking that is around me and mine, by naming things like my phone, my laptop, uh, my land, my love, and realizing that all of these terminologies and ideas are steeped in a form of poison, that, yeah, that we are like 500 years in. And yeah, for some weird reason, not for some weird reason, oh, young people don't comprehend too much, or they never been as probed or as cultured into theories of separability. So in my work thus far, there's been sort of this investigation of this theory of separability, this illusion of self, this idea of me and mine, and I've seen how it has occupied so many hectic parts. I think for what's like hot in my life right now, I've seen how sort of even this idea of separability has occupied the one thing that I would think is juxtaposed separability, love. And as of late, as of this past like last 6 months, I've been sort of drawn into how individualistic, how colonial my love is. The way I love is specifically even contextualized in a male body, contextualized in the culture of being a male. Like I can give you examples, like I saw love as something that is to be controlled, something that is creates dependency, something that is like an example of a waterfall. I saw love as a waterfall, and whenever I saw someone else come to that waterfall, I felt threatened by it. I wanted to put a fence around the waterfall. I wanted to police who has access to the waterfall. And yeah, and that rippled, that sort of this idea or this sort of metaphor rippled, because love is, I think, one of the core parts of our human existence, and the sobering reality to realize that even my love is steeped, and my love needs to be unlearned and unschooled and untangled. Yeah, and I think there's of course lots of grief in this process of unning. And I've been curious as to, okay, we're doing all this work around unning, unschooling, unlearning, but what is it that we move towards? What does the pulling apart, that sort of spaciousness that it creates, that sort of anxiety it creates, what then? And this brings the question of what if Ubuntu? Uh, Ubuntu, it's commonly spoke about as a software. I know that in the Americas, Ubuntu is a software or something of that nature, which also is problematic, and it's probably like cultural appropriation on like some crazy level, uh, crazy level, Silicon Valley level of appropriation. But there's also this idea in this context that we're in of separability, this water of separability, where Ubuntu is also seen as a theoretical practice. I've seen it named in universities, I've seen it named in countless talks, and it's always this romanticization of this ideal way of being. Even the idea of humanity is also romanticized as if we all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, or if we all just lean towards the flowers, or if we all lean towards the rainbows and stuff like that. That is sort of Ubuntu. And that doesn't sit right with me, especially in the day and age where we have so many crazy eco villages. And the idea of how money is currently present in the world has sort of brought up this upspring of like these eco villages that sort of curate spaces. But they, for me, in the spaces I've been in, there's sort of this missing link of what it means, because people are too easy to move away from the discomfort. People are too easy. It's too easy for people to give up on each other. It's too easy for people to even come together at the most critical moment where they have land, resources, and everything, but still feel like something is missing. Still go through so many elements of not being able to hold each other. And it reminds me of some wisdom that was shared, and I also dropped this yesterday, that a lot of the indigenous elders globally in the cosmovisions, when they talk about the polycrisis or they talk about the collapse, they don't think about like global warming. They don't think about like war. They don't think about none of that. What they're concerned about is the internal polycrisis, the crisis within. And what has become super present for me as one of the most critical sites of crisis is relationality, our ability to relate, and specifically not moving into this, once again, romanticized flowers, kumbaya next to the fire, more like moving towards deep, deep, deep responsibility. Ubuntu not as the ability to sit together in comfort and when everything is good and we all yelled. Ubuntu as in like the context of what we are in now, the fact that we're in a crisis. There's so many forms of crisis happening, named and unnamed. And I think one of the most prevalent things, specifically staying in Johannesburg and being alive thus far, I saw that we are losing this capacity to be with human chaos, the ability to be with difficulty, the ability to be like, if someone's going mad or going through something, it's easy to disconnect or to say, nah, I'm not going to deal with this. I see how parent-child relationships, I see how, yesterday we spoke about this, how even the separability that we hold in our own body, that we don't see ourselves as children anymore. So when we speak about children, it's always the external experience of children, but never do we ever speak about children as self as children. And yet everyone in this room, we all were children. So there's even this disconnection when we speak about children and a world in crisis with regard to children, or children, that it's always an external thing. And yeah, I'm speaking crazier, but that's what I think I came to do. So I want to just anchor this in looking at, what does a crisis mean when it's no more outside? What does a crisis mean when it's a relational crisis? That too many of us are falling through each other's hands, and even our love, even our belonging is to be questioned. Because even the word belonging is birthed by separability. So there is no such thing as belonging. It's like separability creates belonging. So if it were a tree, the tree of separability is belonging. So it's connected to the same thing. And I think what I'm starting now to get to the point of what I'm doing here. I'm here to sort of bring a contemplation to us, a collective contemplation, is, what does the activism look like? What does the healing look like? What does sort of COPE 24, I think it's going to be, what does sort of tending to the war, the multiple wars, what does tending to the extraction, the dominant culture, the war, the violence, all of that, what does that look like when it's within you, when it's within us, when it's within the way that we greet each other and the way we say goodbye, when it's in the way we hug each other and the way we move apart from each other, when it's within the way we sit with each other, pray with each other, come to conferences with each other. What does this relational work look like then? And I want to just add one more drop to the pot before I conclude. So in this idea of maybe Ubuntu not being sort of this romanticization of humanity or the human experience, but more a deep sense of responsibility. And I think Vanessa Andriotti wrote about it. Apparently, a friend of mine, Alessandra and Niku, spoke to me also about this, as there's another writer that writes about this word responsibility and breaking it down semantically as in the ability to respond, responsibility. And what a time to be alive, to be able to be sensitive and to respond in whatever capacity to everything happening right now. And we're here with the option to either move into a space of deep panic, deep anxiety, what's it called? Analysis paralysis. Or we can see this as our assignment. This is the responsibility. We've been born into this life, and we have the sensitivity to all these things that are very close to our hearts. Land, people, community, love, learning, education, mountains, rivers, clouds, children. What if it's not in the beauty of it, but Ubuntu has to be with the most chaotic version of it, the most chaotic version of the human experience, and realizing or beginning the inquiry, the questions as to what does it mean to build capacity, to bring forth exiled capacities, capacities that have been locked away, trapped by dominant stories. What does it mean to do this work of going to fetch stories, even create new stories, stories as infrastructure, stories as capacities, to bring to this moment of chaos, to bring to this moment of the polycrisis, both within and without, like without, not as in like absentee, but like outside of self. What does it mean? And that's the I can drop a link here to the essay that talks about specifically. We don't need to focus on education specifically in this point because everything is everything. But I spoke about in the essay, I spoke about what if Ubuntu is not something that we sort of put into education, but is education, that this field of deep responsibility to our neighbors, to each other, to moments. Specifically, I had this experience with my granny that recently passed, where I had the ability to sit with the body that's decaying, to see this moment where my granny negotiated a death and the body had to catch up with a death, and to have to wash her, to clean her, to be with, like, I never thought I would ever wipe my granny's ass, like wipe her, clean her, like in a way that a baby does, to care in that way, to like be with death, with decay in that way, and to realize the care, the amount of care that I'm needing to show up with to be with this process reminds me of the essence of what Ubuntu could mean for this moment right now. In a moment of death, do we have the ability to go warm the water, fill the bath, put gloves on if we need gloves on, and clean the body, clean it, dress it, and give it the opportunity to die? I think I'm going to pause there. Yeah, and we can just, it's open space, guys. This is just the contemplations, and I will feed off you. We'll bounce, we'll engage this thing.
I have a question. Thank you so much. It made me really emotional to hear you because you're touching something. It's the truth. So it's awakening, when something is true, it's like a arrow. So in the past or in my own life, I've reached a point where I realized, wow, I'm stuck somewhere. I have a backpack. This backpack is heavy. I have to get rid of the load now because I cannot keep on moving this way. So it means I have to unpack personally. And for that there's a healing process necessary. And that means understanding, putting light where it's dark, and seeing, those points that where you say you shut down, actually, to see where I do my own shutting down. So my own numbing out, because the numbing out is also what you're talking about. So I kind of see the world as a big example of one human being in their psyche and having to do this whole healing process, as well as the relationships that one can have in a family dynamic. It's the same thing as the world dynamics, but then in big. So it starts with the self. And to start with the self and to start to get rid of this load, it's such a painful process. It's, you know, it's hard work. It's heavy weightlifting. It's not, it doesn't come easy. And I don't, in my immediate surroundings now, maybe more because I found the help I need. So I'm in the right areas where I see that people are looking for the help. But to do the process of becoming conscious of yourself, just yourself. I'm not even talking about anyone exterior, but of course the exterior is a reflection of what's happening in the self, because of course, when you change yourself, the frequency changes, your relationships change, everything changes. But the work on the self actually is the beginning. So it would be like to say, okay, how do you inspire people to do the work, you know, and to go through this painful storm, you know, like bisons go straight through the storm instead of running away from it. Everyone is like more in the cow sense. If the storm is coming, the cows run away from it, but the bison goes right through it. So that's the same thing with healing. So how do you think you can inspire people to do the work on themselves, and then things will naturally unfold, I think, in the exterior? Thank you.
Yo, big up, Vanessa. And I hope I'm saying your name correctly. So
Yes.
grateful for you sharing. And yeah, I don't think anyone has answers here unless Dan got answers. But yeah. I'm gonna leave that one open for us to sit with. And please feel free to share your contemplations aloud. We feel them, we sense them. Yo, big up, Lawrence, come through.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Yeah, it's aligns with what I'm also contemplating, or shall I say dealing with, or whatever, along those lines. And I like the struggle, perhaps, if I can put it that way, of defining the self first and foremost, because what we refer to as I, or what we refer to as me, I think defines what else comes after it, because everything else might then have to come after the I was there, or the I is there. So there is a certain way of seeing it, or seeing the issues that we are talking about as in front of the one who is seeing them. And then the healing and all that which comes together with it already has got a place of freedom, because that which is looking is not necessarily affected by what's happening. And then we have to remove concepts of what you like. I like the way you were stripping some of these concepts in your conversation. And probably that can be one of the most difficult things to engage with. Like, for example, how do you police a waterfall so that you attain or retain your love? Those kind of things, where where the dominant culture is to present ourselves as a nice person, whereas underneath the niceness there is all this dynamism of cruelty and dominance and fear and desire to be something else other than what is already there. So how can one be true and authentic to all these combined and not be swept away by the pulls of push and pull of such dynamics? So creating spaces of how to work with these issues probably is what the previous speaker, I think, is also talking about. Of can we be brave enough to clear space where there is no desire to go to the comforting place, but to articulate what is arising and stay with it to a destination which is unknown except to be here, to not go anywhere, but just to be here, because everything else is happening here. It's not happening anywhere unless it's projected, unless it's denied, unless it's pushed aside, then it goes somewhere, but it's starting from here. So how do we stay in the here-ness of now and work with whatever it is that is arising here and not be swept by the experience, but to know that experience is part and parcel of the time, it's part and parcel of the location, it's part and parcel of the language, part and parcel of the one who is looking at them. And yet the one who is looking at them is not affected. How do we comprehend and work with that in a togetherness of being here? Thank you.
Yo, big up, Lawrence. Thank you for adding those flavors to the pot of contemplation. I want to throw a spanner in this, and this is just to I'm gonna use loose language, guys, and I hope this is a safe space. Please excuse me. But I'm gonna throw a spanner in just to fuck with it. This narrative of difficulty in what we experience to be the work, bruh, like, and I speak to you guys collectively, bruh, a colloquial word for friend, a company, so bruh, but what if the real difficulty is to assimilate to the stories that we're holding on to? What if that is the fuck up? Like, what if that is the real tiresome work? What if that is the bag that Vanessa's talking about? Like, this idea of the atomized individual I, this narrative of individualism that we all assimilate into. What if that is more difficult to assimilate that? And we already created a sense of comfort with that. So we're even comfortable in the struggle of that. What is difficult about the opposite of letting the bag down? And I'm just wanting to say, because this is the narrative, this is like the divisiveness of colonialism. It tries to do that thing to make it seem like it's not able to do it. Kanti, it's the most, and I'm not saying it is this. I'm just wanting to believe, or wanting to, it's a contemplation I'm holding, that what if like the real weight and the real difficulty in this process is where we are right now? What if that is the biggest weight? And what if surrendering is actually lightens the load of being alive? What if being vulnerable and doing, it's actually, you can map it out. For me, I've been invited to systems thinking, and you can map out how to crack the system in your day-to-day lives. An example for me, small rituals. I pee outside. I go pee outside because I just think about, like, yo, the idea of taking a shit in clean water, the idea of peeing in water, it's a bit sus. I know it's normal, but it's a bit sus because water is sacred. And I'm not saying that peeing in water is not sacred. I'm not saying pooing in water is not sacred, but I just think there's like, we're not connecting with water as a spirit form. We're doing this habitual thing of not even recognizing the entity that is giving life to us, this entity that has been on earth from the beginning of time. There's no new water on earth. There is no new water on earth. So when we go to the toilet in the morning and we face down that toilet, whether we're facing forward or we're sitting down on it, are we connected to it, with it as a entity? Are we connected to it as an ancestor? Do we see it as this ancient form that has flowed and went to the sun and came back down billions of times just to be available to us? Do we see it as entity? Do we see it as animistic? And maybe seeing what is animistic, maybe that changes the load. Maybe that changes everything, that pathway, that neural connection, just that capacity of seeing the what is living. Maybe it comes through, like, that changes our biochemistry to give us access to other ways of being. I'm really interested as a Ubuntu, as a like a cellular technology, a cellular biochemical technology, because I realized that colonization, it messed us up on the cellular level. it messed us up on a cellular level. Our biology is tainted by this dominant story. And ways of reclaiming ourselves, our biology, to bring back capacities of me levitating stuff or me connecting with you guys on a Zoom call without a Zoom call, maybe that is accessible with one step of recognizing water as living or as entity, recognizing trees as entity, recognizing like maybe like because I'm thinking about kids, guys. Kids don't talk like you guys. Kids don't talk like adults. When I say you guys, I speak about myself. Like I told you, when the homie doesn't see a chair, he's not thinking, Ish, how am I going to bend this bar to make it look like a rocket? The homie sees a chair, he gets on it, he puts it down, he gets on it, and he's in a rocket. How? And I'm wanting to sort of play with this portal that young people have, and that elders, like some elders, activate the same portal where they can see things that are not there. How can that bring a sense of sobriety to how we do this work and what we even classify to be the work and how we tend to the work? Comes through, Sierra.
Something that popped into my mind is around, you mentioned the word responsibility earlier. And there's something nice about breaking it down to responsibility, something that lightens it, or like the ability to respond, because it's more relational then, because it's like, well, what gives us more capacity to respond? But still, I feel with that word, at least my association with that word, responsibility, I find it a bit sus. There's like a weight to it. It's like, whose responsibility? Is it my responsibility, your responsibility? And there was something that I got from Albert. He was visiting me in the Yukon a while ago, and he was like, well, what if it's inter-responsibility? How does that word land? And that really shifted something for me.
I was listening to Tyson Yunkaporta today, and a couple of days ago, one of my friends was talking about atheism, and that ties into responsibility. Whose responsibility is it? If it's my responsibility, then I should be king. If I am everything, but then if I am as special as anyone else, then everyone should be king. But what is king of kings? And what is responsibility if everyone is king? And what does it mean to be a king? Or what does it mean to take full responsibility of whatever is in your subject? However much we see is beyond us, if it's all make-believe, why not make it believe that it is part of us? There is this entity thing that you've put to a picture. But when I say of responsibility of the highest kind, then you have to be one with everything. You don't have to be all. You have to be one. And when I say that, I know there is no clarity on what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is, if there is no responsibility, or if there is all the responsibility in you, then why would you want this much? Or why wouldn't you want, either you will want to remove all responsibility, or you will want to take all responsibility. Why would you stop in middle? Why would you stop somewhere in the middle? What would make you stop in somewhere in the middle?
May I react? So I think the ability to respond, unless you do the work, it's actually driven by the unconscious. So meaning that all the stuff that you grew up with, all the attachment system you've had, the dysfunctionality of the family, anything, or the cultural dysfunctionality, the global dysfunctionality, etc., etc. And then you're reacting in an unconscious way to things. So you're not an actor, you're a reactor. So you're not able to respond actually yet in a conscious way. And until you do the work, then you're able to respond in a conscious way. So I think the unconscious is leading everybody until they do the work. And when they do the work, then they will be able to respond with more ability, actually, I think.
I'm a bit sus of like separability that gives us the idea that there is spaces of work and spaces of not work, or spaces of stops and spaces of starts, even spaces of disconnection and spaces of reconnection. This also blurs the lines between, and yo guys, I hope this is a safe space. But it blurs the lines between what is like orthodoxly right and what is orthodoxly wrong. And that, of course, does that thing of like opening up a portal and maybe creating a bit of a vacuum in terms of conversation. But I think I want to bring it down to sort of just hold it in a container before it gets too abstract. And I think in this underlying idea of responsibility is this just simple idea that, okay, not simple, but this idea that, and it sounds like I want you also to invite your body to feel the tensions in it. The idea that we are connected to everything, and we continue to be connected even in our ignorance. We continue to be connected even though we continue to be connected to water, even though maybe the way we are with it right now, we don't acknowledge it. We continue to be with ancestors, even though sometimes we don't acknowledge them. We continue to be with sun, even though some of us spend days of never looking up to the sun. And I think there's this sort of matriarchal, and I don't say matriarchal as the opposite of patriarchy. I speak about matriarchy as its own cosmovision, where, yeah, everything is connected. It's really impossible to sort of think of it, anything to be not connected. We are all here. We are all sitting here. We are all sitting here, breathing air, having drank water, having eaten food, grown from one earth that is here. There has been passing messages. Like I told you, like there's no new water. So even in when we sort of have this thinking of like we starting or we disconnected or we're not doing our work yet, I think there's like, I think it's worth sort of bringing in this idea that what if this is not my story? What does the work look like? What if the work is this process I'm in right now that maybe is, I can call, like I had this with myself, like I was chilling for a while, chilling a bit too long. And I started to feel guilty about chilling. And I was like, fuck, sorry for swearing. I was like, damn, I need to do the work. I need to start doing the work. I need to sort of like do stuff, you know? And then I said, that sounds a bit colonial. What if I need to take ancestral rest? What if I need to chill for all my ancestors that worked from 3 in the morning till 3 at night? What if my rest is actually sacrament and yeah, and I'm really, guys, I'm really wanting to invite, like, as much as this is deep, like theoretical, heavy content, like I'm wanting really to evoke your child brain as you grasp these concepts. What if we talking about a chair and the mere reality that this chair can be anything else is basically the thing we need to bridge. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be, for Tom, it could be a rocket. For Dan, it could be a blanket. For Sierra, it could be a mic. A whole chair is a mic. And I'm saying, like, this ability to be in a relational field with everything, such as even a chair, that we have the ability, and I think someone said it, where our words shape that reality. And that shaping of that reality, that ability to see a chair and to name it to be something else, and then have the ability to interact with it on a level that maybe is not deep, that doesn't maybe feel like we're doing trauma work, you know, because these things tend to be, have been facultized, like trauma work tends to be when you're in a circle, light a few candles. Like, maybe that's not the only way. Maybe simply being in the sand with a 2-year-old, throwing each other with mud, maybe even sitting on the toilet and just giving yourself a moment to be with yourself on the toilet, not with a phone, not with anything, just to be present for this biological process. Maybe that. So I really want to sort of put this idea of Ubuntu away from this theoretical practice that puts us in spaces of, like, not that it's not valid. I think what Ubuntu is really requiring from us, or inviting us to be with, is a deep space of practice. Is a deep space of practice. And to realize that we're doing it and it's happening even when we think we're the furthest away from it. That even when we think we're the most lonely, or the most alone, or the most scared, or the most effed up with whatever's going on, there's still something pushing oxygen through our nose into our bodies, sustaining life. Water still continue to flow. And I'm just questioning, like, how romantic and how also crazy and scary that the world continues to do this for you and I. And what and why can we offer? What is why? Like, it comes to that existential questions, guys. We finally got to the existential part of this conversation. Why are we alive? And what is going on in the world? And I would say that that answer is within every breath. That process is within every breath. What is the sun requiring from you today when it speaks to you? What is the water requiring from you today when you drink it? What is the words requiring you when you listen to them? What does your eyes require from you with the things you are seeing? And I would also want to move strongly away from this rationalization of, like, thinking rationally about this. Maybe it's just to sit with it. Maybe it's just to dream on it. Maybe it's just to take a nap with it. Yeah, so I'm also inviting, like, non-rational ways of being with our process of contemplation. Sense making is one faculty of that exists within our human capacity. Not everything does require us to make sense. There's other ways of being with stuff that is not sense making. And I'm wanting to invite Ubuntu to a space that is not about sense making, but about deep relating that looks different and unique to each and one of us. Specifically, not as the utopian sunshining experience, more like when we are stretched and we feel the most, like, scared, anxious. I want us to tap into this, or this space, in that moment. What does this require from us? Why am I responding? And also to defragment, or to sort of not put that responding into a rational meaning, like, but like, yeah, questions, just to question it.
That's to, you asked for structure. So long time ago, Nelson Mandela, I heard a thing about Nelson Mandela, and I tried to put it into practice. Be the last to speak. And I'm not doing that right now. But when you are trying to be the last to speak in a conversation that's called for, you're informed by everything and you're in relationship to everything when you're speaking, even if you're not speaking to it. I think that is one of the best practices of Ubuntu because it's informed by everything. Trying to be informed by everything.
Can I stretch it and say realizing that you're informed by everything and like move away from this trying as if it's external or there's a absence? It's more like the realization to say, yo, I've been drinking the same water that has been on earth all the time since the beginning of time. I'm definitely connected to everything. So how imagination of how to activate that whole earth power in ourselves as a quest, as a cultural response, as a cultural breathe in and a breathe out of Ubuntu.
Beyond sense making.
And with and beyond. So not to throw anything out.
I wanted to share something that was like on my mind with all these train of thoughts. That I was thinking this idea, like we are colonized, like in our so many layers. We have so many layers. It depends also from where we are, like our context, our territories, our ancestors, like our ways of being in this world has so many layers, and just depends where the layers start. And also if we are colonized in our desires, in our ways of loving, which is something that it's very deep in ourselves. And now I was like also putting it together with what you said about elders. Indigenous elders are talking about like an internal polycrisis. And oh wow, if they got to see that so with clarity, I was like, oh, so we need, like, I don't think we have time on this lifetime to just kind of let go of everything. Maybe it will be maybe for next generations or something that our ancestors did, like in logical sense. Like there is something there with all of the world and what we are having, what we're living, that, oh no, if we try to do it like with reason, I think we'll be lost. We'll get lost in words, in this idea of belonging, in this idea of doing the work, in these things of like putting more weight in our bags to try to make sense. And it's part of our game, I feel, in this, like we're making a conference on reimagining education to try to make sense, like to try to accompany each other in our paths in a way. So I was kind of thinking, oh, better to let go, just to take that weight in our backs and just kind of reconnect and like do another exercise. I feel for myself, like, okay, maybe if I try to do another exercise, could be fun to just try to see from other places. And also the idea of belonging, like, oh, so this started as a colonial construction also, like that you need to belong. And a lot of people suffer because they don't feel like they belong. And to me, it was like, I don't understand. How do you don't belong? Like, what? But I've heard this a lot. And I'm like, huh. So yeah, I didn't know like it was like a colonial thing. I thought, oh, like this idea of they didn't do the work in a way. But it is part of whatever we need. I feel like I need to let go. But yeah, it's just ideas there that I wanted to share. I don't know.
Thank you so much for that. It's indeed, you can just toss the weight out of the bag if you, it seems easy, but I think the social isolation you're speaking of the identity, it's coming also from a thing of having losing the compass of the self in all these layers that you are mentioning as well, which are completely valid, which are so multi-layered that it's like, where do you begin even? So on a cellular level, indeed, like you mentioned, but the isolation of the identity, I think, is an internal isolation, and that is the numbing out of all the stuff that everyone is running away from. So to stop numbing out, it's to affront it. What is making me numb out? What happened? Acknowledge it, have compassion for it, compassion for myself, love myself. By loving others, I can manage to love myself. So indeed, in community, you get compassion because you can hear other stories that help you get compassion for yourself, and then not judge yourself and the shame and the blame and all this stuff. This is the weight of the bag, the shame and the blame and the carrying and thinking I deserve this non-identity. I deserve this isolation, and continue to isolate and get out of the isolation and connect indeed, which is helping me. Yeah, so thank you so much for that insight.
Thank you. Feel free, guys, to drop in. I'm noticing Dan.
Yeah, no, this is so lovely. Yeah, so many different thoughts have been popping up as people were sharing, but I think the two things. What's that? Oh, it's good. The two things that are alive now is feeling interconnectedness or feeling. In another session, a layman shared the practice of feeling remorse, and intentionally each day sitting down and thinking of the impacts of your actions, you know, through the car you drive or the food you eat, or you know, in some way or another, our actions are having impacts that are not always positive. But I think feeling that is a big one. And for me, like a personal inquiry I've been with is around acceptance and doing better, like accepting the way things are, accepting my predicament, accepting the people I'm with, and striving to do better, like both of these. And it can get hard to like, yeah, I'm still, especially in relationship, of like accepting somebody where they're at and also wanting them to be better. And sometimes I get stuck in only accepting and only being like, oh, this is just the way it is. And then sometimes, yeah, we can get stuck in not giving each other feedback or not saying, hey, like when you did that, it impacted me. And also around control, it's like, I sometimes have trouble giving feedback because I'm like, you are the way you are, like, and I accept that. But if it's making me sad, or if it's making me anxious or whatever, it's like, what is my responsibility in relation to somebody else, is an interesting one. And yeah, living in community was a big teacher of this. And somebody called me out once of like, I hear you intellectually understand interconnectedness, but do you really embody it, or do you really understand it? This was in a monastic community. So yeah, really like challenged me, confronted me, and I had to really look into that. But one of the big teachings I gained was your actions matter. Every single thought, every single word, every single action impacts all living beings across space and time. And to really feel that and take that in really opened me up, and I feel like filled me with purpose as well as with remorse. And a simple, tangible example was like sitting in silent meals. We'd have silent meals at the monastery, and noticing the way people ate impacted the whole group. The intention was silence, right? The cultural norm was silence in that container. And if somebody would walk loudly and stomp, or eat loudly, or you know, slam their chair, it impacted the whole group. And you could see on a very tangible level how your actions impact everybody else. And also the teaching of non-locality, of hearing a bird 200 meters away and seeing that that bird is right here, right now, like the cutting off of space. And for me, experiencing that led me to experience, oh, that person in China doing that thing is impacting me right now. The person on the other side of the world doing something is happening right here, right now, in this moment. So yeah, for me, it was the deep, tangible practices. I'm curious about Ubuntu, and from your traditional background, if there are contemplative practices that are supportive to bringing people into feeling this interconnectedness. I was greatly blessed with the Buddhist practices and the teacher that offered these to me. But yeah, I'm always curious of different practices from different traditions that enable people to feel Ubuntu, or to experience it, or to develop, cultivate the capacity for it. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Dan. Noticing Lawrence.
The conversation sparks in me the question of what is it that is seeing my seeing, especially when you were talking about the what is the sun asking of me from me, that sort of relationship. So that which sparked that sort of contemplation is the naturalness of what is happening. The breathing is happening on its own. I don't have control over it. My heartbeat is beating on its own. I don't have control over it. And I can't even claim it to be mine. It's happening on its own. But for some reason, I connect with it as my own. So at what point can I get the freedom of realizing the naturalness of what is happening as my part and parcel of being connected to it, and yet I'm also free from that interconnectedness? So there's that wrapping around of ownership, of connectedness, and yet that connectedness has got a freedom of disconnection. I don't necessarily have to own the word my body implies that there is something outside the body that claims the body. So that questions my identity as to what is it then that is claiming the body to be itself. And that is within these things that we are talking about, of them being independent of their own, of themselves. So the echo that runs through the whole system knocks through every element in the system. So is it the system that owns the system, or is it every element of the system that makes the whole system? And yet the system cannot exist without one element within the system. That small element within the system has to be there for the system to be there. So there are those kind of ways of looking to this, to the extent, like I can go back to where I started off and say, where would be that which sees the seeing? Because seeing is happening. Is it the eyes that see, or something else sees the eyes seeing? I don't know if you can step into that and be able to not necessarily articulate, but simply to be with it in such a way and realize that I'm part and parcel of everything, but I'm also not everything. So can I be then empty of everything for me to own everything? Or should I be everything so that the emptiness can reign around me as that which contains me? So I have to be contained into something. And yet I'm not the container. So there are those kind of shall I say, concepts or interactive merging and separation of those kind of things.
Thank you for those gifts of contemplation, Lawrence. Super, super grateful. Before we continue, I just want to check. Andrea, what we doing time-wise?
I was just making a message for you. So the next session will be in 30 minutes, but I guess that we could start to wrap it up a bit, maybe 15 minutes more if you want to, but
15. Okay. Yeah, we can do that. I think it'll be healthy. And I also advise all of us to drink water, as water has the ability to take energy from the head and bring it down to the body, just like it takes water from the mountain and brings it down to the valley. Let's be mountains and let's waterfall with no policing. Dean, I noticed Vishva, did you want to say something? Do you want to add something to the pot? And also, maybe if there's anyone else who has been holding back, you're probably the one that needs to speak the most. So if you feel that tension of, I shouldn't say something, or I'm feeling anxious to say something, I'm inviting you to resonate with that and to respond, have a responsibility, play with that word. If you have that feeling, I'm inviting you to speak into the space as we conclude.
The lineage I come from speaks about intention, and this lineage I'm studying about right now despises intention. The lineage I come from speaks about right intention. The lineage I'm speaking of in the next instance, the one I'm studying at this moment, despises intention. How can the both of them not be conflicting was never even in the box for me until today in the morning when I realized they were congruent in some way. What is the intention of a seed? What is the intention of putting the seed as a sacrifice into a fire? What is the intention of the fire? Is there anything intentional, or is it make believe? Is intention just a concept?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Just to go back to Dan's contemplation around tools of practicals around language is a big one here in Africa. The word pa ntu refers to ntu is rooted into people of nature, people that are like into you is earth people. Pa abantu, the people of earth. When we greet, we don't have language for singular. We are always in plural. Siyabona, sawubona. It's it's always layered. So I think this also adds to this idea of Ubuntu as practice, not as sort of something separate, that in every word that we speak, in every evocation of connection, and we use Sawubona, Mkhulu, Gogo, we use these words in respect to mountains, in respect to trees, in respect to plants, not just to humans. It's interesting also with this pronoun thing, that we also don't, our pronouns, or in a lot of sort of African languages, pronouns don't hold so much weight. For someone to be called, for instance, Gogo would be referred to as a grandmother. It can also be referred to as someone who's been initiated, and it can also, I can refer to a male in that same, by that same word. So there's lots of ways in which language is coded, especially indigenous languages. I don't think it's unique to Africa. I've seen this in different territories, how language is encoded with Ubuntu. It's encoded with a certain epistemology, a certain ontology that exists within language. And that's why sometimes when we get into contemplative spaces and we are using English, we go into rationalization, and then we end up going into sort of a feedback loop that sometimes can create headaches. And that's why I want the invitation of What If Ubuntu is looking to move away from this theatrics of rational English language into the embodied practice, and not as this practice as knowing, more like this practice as holding deep curiosity and tending to that curiosity as that fire that we need to gather around and sit with, as it's in curiosity that we can continue to question, but in answers we sort of, it's a stop street. It's like a red robot that I would say is, I don't think there's anything in answers. And that's just maybe a sense of maybe immaturity of me for now. But I'm really tethering to the questioning in this phase of life. And it's with that I'm also so grateful to be in collective ceremony and ritual around contemplation, specifically in a time like now, where it's 15 minutes past 4 o'clock somewhere in the world, and at the same time it's different times everywhere else. So even maybe the last thing that I wanted to say, just the last bar, is around this. I saw the word freedom here, and freedom is also for me one of those red flag words, like freedom. And it's also we can go full circle back to this idea of unlearning. So unlearning as freedom, but I think that is dangerous because we are always entangled. So not freedom, but more entanglement. And this is a big word in the Ecoversity spaces, is entanglement. So I think Lawrence made mention of this thing about like being free from, and yet having this capacity to constantly be with. And I would say maybe the word that I'm sort of utilizing there is entanglement, how we entangled with all the chaos of the world, how we entangled with all the waters, all the air, all the emotions. I'm entangled with everyone here in this space now. Believe it or not, we are entangled deeply to be holding ceremony together here today. So I've been playing with this entangled, and I don't believe in freedom. I actually am sus when people say freedom. I'm like, or people say we're giving stuff away for free. I'm like, what does this mean? Because I think there's no freedom in entanglement. And in my unlearning journey, there was so much unlearning from family, unlearning from friends, unlearning from love, unlearning from so much. And I was like, fuck no, this can't be it. This doesn't feel safe. So the contemplation was like, what can I tether other to? So looking at sort of the movement now, like a post-decolonial world, is that we're not moving away from, but what are we moving towards? What are we entangled with? What are we choosing to be entangled with? What is our ability, responsibility as entanglement? What is the what is wanting to name itself to be, for me, well, like, sorry, English. What is it that's sparking and that moving in me that I'm entangled with, that I thought for a long time I'm not entangled with, or even denied, or I numbed myself to say, I'm not entangled with Dan. I'm not going to go check on this guy. I'm not going to send him a message. I'm not entangled with Andrea. I'm not entangled with Tom. I'm not entangled with Mayolanda or Lawrence. Why do I need to call them or check in on them? And choosing the opposite. Instead of doing the numbing or following the dominant story, how can I write a new story, or at least respond in my own capacity when I can, at my time? Also, no shame, no guilt, no being weird, just however it feels right for you. That is possibly the responsibility and the leaning towards and the tethering instead of the unning. And unning also has the contradiction. I'm also inviting that in this non-rational world of Ubuntu, there's no such thing as the right way or a thing. It's about entanglement and contradiction. That is Ubuntu, the ability to be with rain, and that to know also rain can drown you, water can drown you, it can be destructive. So to have sort of this weird relationship with it, where it's like, yo, I love you and I can mess with you, but I'm also got this sort of this other element where I also realize that things can pop at any time, and I don't hold any sense of entitlement of how things should be. Because that's also the colonialist spell, is that we want control and we want predictability. And that control and predictability produces entitlement. So we're entitled to a certain life. We're entitled to a certain way of feeling like we've done it. We're entitled to a certain way of feeling like we're doing the work. Or there's lots of layers of entitlement. And I think what comes from the letting go is the opportunity to be with what is. And in being with what is to be with yourself and all the capacities that have the ability to be present in that moment. Whether it be sorrow, whether it be grief, whether it be joy, whether it be difficulty, whether it be sadness, just to be with it and to provide a sense of hospitality for all these expressions and experiences of being human. And I think it's on that we can conclude, yeah? Big up. I wish I had that reggae one. That poo 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 poo. Guys, next time for the conference, we need to have that soundboard. So poo 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 poo. Reggae one for everyone in the space. Big up, big up.
Thank you.
Do something crazy before you guys go. Do something crazy. Do something just to disrupt. So whatever that is for you, whatever, contort, mess up your narrative. Ubuntu. There we go, Dad. We go. Be non-rational, be irrational.